And although a town hall meeting took place the following week to discuss this incident, no official statement by the University of Florida administration had been sent out to the general student body by then. And when an email was finally sent out, more than a week after the incident had taken place, former President Bernie Machen addressed students, faculty, and staff in an email, which said, and I'll quote, "The students in the fraternity have since apologized, and they have said they were unaware of the negative connotations evoked by blackface," unquote. I would find this response recycled over my time at the university. Too often, the excuse is that students did not know the implications of their actions, and then an apology sent out on their behalf. And I felt at that time that the apology was not sufficient. Students of color remained dismayed, and another issue was swept under the rug. And it happened with the blackface incident in 2012, and it happened again in 2014 when a racist anti-Asian flyer had been reported circulating on the University of Florida campus. October 24th, 2012 was strike one. And the blackface incident was a form of overt racism. But as I soon entered my sophomore year, I'd realized that not all racism is overt, that it's a system, it's institutionalized. That year I became involved as an ambassador of the Institute of Hispanic Latino Cultures, or La Casita as we affectionately called it. And La Casita gave me some of the best memories I had as a student here. It was because of fellow ambassadors and staff members at the Multicultural and Diversity Affairs Department, or MCDA, that I learned more about my own culture and how to be an ally to other communities of color and marginalized groups on campus. And when I first started in La Casita in 2013, the Institute had just gotten a new director, Dr. Olivia Garcia, and Dr. Garcia was learning the ropes of managing La Casita and MCDA, and I was learning the responsibilities of being a student ambassador. And I probably expected more staff at the Institute, but I soon realized that La Casita was just professionally supported by one director and one graduate assistant. And sure, some of the ambassadors are paid and were paid, but it was just one director, just one, and a team of students who were responsible for the services and learning opportunities that were offered to the entire Latinx population at UF, which now currently makes up 14.62% of the student body. And that wasn't just the case in La Casita. It looked the same across all of the departments of MCDA. The Institute of Black Cultures, Asian Pacific Islander American Affairs, and LGBTQ Affairs. And I'm sure we're all familiar with the phrase, you put your money where your mouth is. And to me, UF was not prioritizing MCDA, not prioritizing the individuals responsible for creating safe and welcoming environments for LGBTQ individuals and students of color, and therefore it wasn't prioritizing those students. Strike two for me was underpaying MCDA directors and understaffing the department. A department responsible for leadership, mentorship programs, Greek diversity training, and ensuring welcoming spaces and advocating for marginalized students. But truly, I am really thankful that I crossed paths with MCDA when I was a student, and by sophomore year, I was growing into the person I wanted to be with my involvement with La Casita and HSA. But in another way, I was also hiding myself. When I was elected into student government my freshman year, I was the only Latina in the student political party backed by the system, which was then called Swamp Party. And freshman to sophomore year, I felt that us few Latinos in SG had to embody a certain image. I felt a responsibility to represent the community and was told that my actions would directly impact potential opportunities for the rest of my community. We had to follow the rules, and we had to keep in mind, because if we didn't, we knew that we might be the only Latinos that year to have a seat in student government. And so why does it work this way? Why do I keep referring to something called the system? Well, I'll point to an article published by the student newspaper, The Alligator, because I want to point out that this has been documented, published, and reported on at the university numerous times, but it hasn't changed. And there's an Alligator article titled "Blue Key Membership Controlled by Powerful Few," which explains explains, and I'll quote, "The system is a fluid set of alliances governed by a select group of power brokers, members of 5 Greek organizations who have risen through the ranks, who have a hand in deciding everything from who gets to run for student body president to who gets tapped into Florida Blue Key." Unquote. The system is a Greek organization system that is controlled by the white majority sororities and fraternities in the Interfraternity Council and Panhellenic Council. It essentially runs student government under a system of patronage. Greek houses and other organizations band together in groups that support candidates and later sponsor those student leaders to be inducted into Florida Blue Key. And each group has a Blue Key representative who helps negotiate deals that determines who holds positions and is predominantly controlled by white organizations. But even though it's controlled by white organizations, members of minority communities had to become a part of the system in an effort to get seats at the table. Community leaders of the Hispanic Student Association, Black Student Union, and Asian American Student Union became a part of the system in order to ensure that there's community representation, which is why you see that in certain years there's always a Latinx or a Black vice presidential candidate or a Asian American treasurer candidate, and they usually flip depending on the year. And in exchange for votes, support, and an image booster for Florida Blue Key and student government, there may just be a few seats available that year for Latinx, Black, and Asian students. And in my mind, when I was in undergrad, communities are controlled, and they were controlled. You see, the system controls the budget that funds the student organizations representing those communities. The very student organizations who work with the system to gain favors. I experienced this. My sophomore year, I was part of the Senate's Budget and Appropriations Committee, and it's a committee responsible for dividing their student activity and service fees to fund student organizations. And it's a committee that's basically, the membership is already predetermined by the time you interview, because they've already made deals as to who's going to get a seat on this committee. And that year, I was just lucky that the Hispanic community had garnered enough favor with the system, and they allowed me to be on this committee. Yay, hooray! And every year, really, there's this big tagline. It's, "We will decrease your student organizational funding budget if you don't follow our lead." And that's really kind of like what they tell HSA, BSU, and ASU. And they threaten them. They say that their budgets will be decreased if the student senators and SG that you have don't toe the party line. So like if they don't follow our party, then it's a threat that we might cut your budget. And it's an old tactic. There was actually an interview by the same Dr. Orr history program from a student in 1989 who said that when he came here, student government had been trying to defund the Black Student Union year after year after year. So that's 1989, and I was experiencing this in 2014. And so student government, white students have the ability on this campus to defund cultural organizations. And if you think that they don't have the ability, well, at least they have the negotiating power and will to threaten you and your organization that your budget will be cut. And it honestly, when I was in HSA, that was a real concern for us. It was like they're threatening our budget, our programming. How are we going to put on programming for students if we're being threatened that our budget's going to get cut because we don't follow the party line in SG when we're in Senate? And that, for me, was honestly strike 3 when I was a sophomore. And it's a system so well documented that there's countless of alligator articles and even a court case against the system. But year after year, nothing changes. And when you call this out, students honestly just think that you're lying. They say, oh, you just have to apply to be a part of student government. But usually it's the students who say that aren't the students that are making the backroom deals, because a lot of times student government really isn't about merit. It's about who you had advocating for yourself in a room. And the administration knows this, staff members also know this, but those select few students continue to be emboldened and enabled year after year. And if I tried to ignore it before, my sophomore and junior year, I knew by that point in my junior year that at UF, institutions meant to represent us, controlled us. And those who rebel felt were intentionally underfunded. And this leads me to January 2015, a day where 6 women of color representing HSA, BSU, and ASU were in a room with 3 white bloc leaders from Florida Blue Key. A day we decided to run against the system, and ironically, this was a time where I was community leader of HSA, so as I mentioned before, I was part of the system party, and I was actually the one responsible during the beginning of my junior year to barter with Florida Blue Key to ensure, the 4 Latinx students that got into Senate that year that were on the Senate slate, or the 3 Latinx students that got into Florida Blue Key. And honestly, after strike 3, I was tired, I was sickened, I was frustrated, and I was becoming the person that I didn't want to be. Honestly, I was having classes being taught by Genesis Lara, Dr. Paul Ortiz, Dr. Samuel Stafford, Professor Kevin Funk, Dr. Guerra, classes that were about the history of race in the United States, about privilege and systems of power, about the colonial history of Latin America, and here I was perpetrating a racist and classist system myself. I was pretty horrified at myself and what I was seeing, and I'm glad that in January 2015 we fought for what could be and not continued on the path of what had always been. Our vision that night included representing everyone who had ever been rejected by a system who told them that they were either tokens or not enough. Many people laughed at our idea of running independently against the system, about running an all-minority ticket, and they didn't take us seriously. It was an uphill battle, and we recognized what we were risking, right? Because for years we had been part of the system who guaranteed us seats at the table. We were risking SG positions, Florida Blue Key spots, any sort of influence. But we knew in 2015, we knew in 2015 that our communities were honestly just tired of being taken advantage of and finally wanted to break from the chains. We wanted to create a student government that actually represented students and their needs and didn't hold positions or threats over their heads. And that's how Access Party was founded, and that's how I became the first Latina student body president, alongside with my running mates, Nicholas Carey and Kevin Doan, and alongside the supports and efforts made by hundreds of students on this campus and countless faculty and staff members. In that campaign and subsequent year, my senior year when I was governing, it was nothing short of stressful. I knew and still know that during serving as the first Latina student body president under Access Party, that I represented an independent party and had to prove that independent parties could get just as much work done as a system party, but I also had to prove that students of color were not incompetent leaders. And because Access had only one control of the executive branch, it meant that we could really only change and influence the programs and initiatives that student government was leading. We couldn't change the rules or the codes that governed SG because we didn't have the majority in the legislative branch. And structural injustice in student government is written into codes that can't be easily changed. It's only changed in Senate. It's such as online voting. So a couple years ago, probably you in this room voted to have online voting, but SG has refused to change it, and we continue to have a voting system that's inaccessible to countless of students on this campus. And that's just an example of a constant battle day in and day out. And when you're battling like that, and when you know that certain staff members at UF would do anything to watch your administration fail and ensure that you're not properly supported to succeed, it becomes clear that UF really does have a long way to go. And when I first started my term, there were certain, when you can walk in a room and you can tell that you're not wanted there? That was what I experienced almost every day when I was student body president 2 years ago. Not with everyone, with certain people. And just on Tuesday of this week, there was a report published by USC that gave UF an F for representational equity, a C for gender equity, and B grades for completion equity and student to black faculty ratio. And the report was specifically talking about black students and faculty of color, but it's really not surprising to me. Is it really surprising on a campus where there's a racist incident making regional or national headlines almost every year since 2012, right? We have the blackface incident, we have the anti-Asian racist flyer on campus, and just this May, we had 2 students, both of them from a black fraternity, manhandled on stage. And is it surprising that that report came out where MCDA and faculty of color are underfunded, or there's so few faculty of color that there's just simply not enough bodies to get done all of the work that needs to get done? Is it surprising that that report came out on a campus where students and faculty of color have to work and function in a system that sees them as tokens? To me, it's not surprising that that report came out. I would not be the person I am today without the University of Florida. I am grateful for the opportunities this institution has given me, and for the individuals here who made UF a second home and opened future doors for me, and for the individuals who are fighting to make the campus fulfill its potential. But I also ask more from our university. I don't have all of the answers as to how we can improve the racial climate at UF, but I for sure know that 1, it begins by properly funding faculty members of color and programs supporting minority students. It also begins by stepping aside and changing programs who perpetrate the worst of student leadership. We recently just got a Chief Diversity Officer, and administrators need to let the Chief Diversity Officer do the work he needs to do and take a real hard look at student government. And ultimately, I think what I will say to you all is that we just need to make sure that we're always fighting for what can be and not for what has been.
Amen.
Thank you.